to step on Karen's show in any way. We'd planned to offer 4 lectures this semester, but because of the fire, 2 were moved to spring. Lectures by Ed Castellini and Tony Ruiz. By the way, Karen is mindful of your schedules. Her lecture will conclude by 12:50, and you should probably want to turn your gizmos off. Now the good stuff. Karen Walker, Dr. Karen Walker, is unusually determined to teach always as if lives are at stake. There is no way when she says, "To hell with it, I'm tired." This can make her a bit daunting at times, perhaps, but I know her students and her former students would testify to the efficacy of this mania Karen Walker has for making each class something that, for the student, will make that day interesting and useful, sometimes even remarkable. It is lucky to be around such things, as I have been for the 21 years and 4 months I've known her. If, by chance, you are unfamiliar with graduate school terms, a master's degree in English, for instance, requires 2 or 3 years study and a thesis, a damned long essay. Karen's was on Ralph Ellison's masterpiece of African-American literature, Invisible Man, and she probably discovered something profound in it about technology. A PhD, a doctorate, requires up to 7 years study and a dissertation. Book. Karen Walker's book included technology's role in literature, deepening her study of that subject, and she focused on dystopian literature, stories and scholarship about societies that have gone to hell. For instance, George Orwell's 1984, probably the most famous example of dystopian literature, as she will explain. I think you came to the right place. Please welcome Karen Walker.
Thanks so much for coming, and thank you for the introduction, Richard, my husband. I have a sign-in sheet. I'll start it here for students that came. Just sign in, and I'll take it at the end. Okay. Well, it's great to get to talk to you about a book that I love. I regret my piece of paper. I tried to memorize it and I couldn't do it. So I'm going to have to just have a little bit of a distracting piece of paper through this. But I was remembering as I was doing the talk that I would be doing it here, and I'm thinking about all the ghosts of those before me that have been up here, and it's amazing what's happened in this room. And I remember I started at the JC a long time ago, and I sat right here and I took a class from Jerry Waxman, who is Keith Waxman's father, and he was stunning. And I remember sitting out there, and he very scientifically explained to us how we are made of the stuff of dead stars. And we were just like, what? And then he got through his lecture, and he was very, matter of fact, made of the stuff of dead stars. And then he said, and then we turn around and look at ourselves. And that was just one of those just mind-bending moments for me. And I've had so many in this school. So for me, I get to talk about my favorite stuff here, and I'm very excited to talk to you about 1984 by George Orwell, which is indeed a masterpiece of dystopian literature, which, as Richard explained, it's basically the opposite of utopia, works that are set in a bad place. Topo, society has gone to hell. Often it's the near future. And my aesthetic is pretty dark. My friend Anne-Marie laughs with me, but I can't help it. And it's always been that way. And when my friends were playing with Barbies, I had a witch doll that was green and a black, she wore black, and I loved her. And when I look back, like all the books I read, just the stuff I've loved, that's just always been my aesthetic. I know a lot of you love this novel too. It actually has cult status. And if you do, it's possible that your aesthetic is a little dark too, because this might be the grimmest of all grim dystopian novels. You come to the end of it and it feels like there's just no hope in this novel whatsoever. There's just no way out. So it might surprise you to hear, I'm in fact surprised to find, after reading it so many times, that the book does explore aesthetics and the role of beauty. It absolutely does, which is what I want to show you today. And I'm actually pretty excited about it because I haven't heard anybody talk about that. Somebody must have. I've done the research, I'm looking, and if you find something, let me know, but I haven't heard it. So I also think that all books, help us think about things that we can't think about. They give us that concept, that vocabulary, which is exactly what the Big Brother system wanted to take away. Take away books, take away language, so that you can't have the thought. So to be clear here, my argument is that 1984 depicts relationships between aesthetics and power. Okay, so later I'll talk to you about how I think that really matters to us, to all of us. Now I should define that term, aesthetics. So aesthetics is a set of principles that's concerned with the nature and appreciation of beauty, especially in art. And it's used in other ways, like it can be a set of principles underlying and guiding the work of a particular artist or artistic movement, the Cubist aesthetic or the punk aesthetic. And we all have a sense of aesthetics. Your notion of beauty, whatever it is you tend to gravitate toward. And whether it's rap or horror films or Jane Austen novels or Martin Scorsese films, we have them, everybody does. And if you're wondering what your aesthetic is, I would suggest that you look at what you love and not what you should love, what you do love. And if somebody took that away or forbade it to you, you'd be very upset. And your life would become less beautiful as a result. So just a little tiny bit of background. My aesthetics are formed, I can see very clearly now, in a lot of ways by growing up in LA and San Fernando Valley. So I grew up in like Canoga Park and Van Nuys and Reseda. And for me, it wasn't horrible, and it's different for everybody, but it was dispiriting. So when I came to this quote in 1984, I just thought, yeah, I get that. So Winston Smith in the novel, like him, I felt, quote, a mute protest in my bones, the instinctive feeling that the conditions I lived in were wrong somehow, and that the truly characteristic thing about modern life was not its cruelty, but simply its bareness, its dinginess, its listlessness. So indeed, for me, that's how it was in the valley. But then eventually, as a kid, I did discover a radical space. And I truly mean this. I know it sounds kind of corny, but it was the public library. And for me, the public library just opened up worlds, just astonishing worlds and beauty. I ran into 1984. And when I read 1984, I felt a sense of yes, about something that I couldn't word. I just didn't have the words for it, but that book helped me to have the words. And then later, many years later, as I made modernity my entire study, my life's work, I came to this quote by Herbert Marcuse, which just blew me away. I couldn't say why exactly, that the fight for life, the fight for Eros, is the political fight. And it just twanged me like, yeah. So I started to study modernity, and that's what I've done. And what I can see now is that Orwell, okay, he captures totalitarian systems and he does it brilliantly, and we know that, and a lot's been written about it. I think he also captures our system, very much so, which I'm going to talk a lot about in the second half. Come right on in. I think our system are its aesthetics, its values, and in many ways, its pain. So the book, I'm going to talk about the book first, then I'll move to us. I have to say, amazingly, if you look at it, the theme of aesthetics shows up on page 1 immediately. Because we see immediately that Winston lives at Victory Mansions with a hallway that smelled, I had to change the misspelling in that, it said smelled, that smelled of boiled cabbage and old rag mats, where in his flat he can look down on London, a place of sordid colonies of wooden dwellings like chicken houses. Okay, so those are the aesthetics of Oceania. Okay, then you notice that the workspace is horrible. He works in cubicles with no windows, and the food they have to eat is absolutely horrible. So the aesthetics overall of where Winston lives, Oceania, are completely dispiriting. Then, to make my argument that the motif of aesthetic shows up right away, we get this certain objects, like the book that Winston is drawn to, that has no words in it, but it's quoted in Orwell calls it, it's a peculiarly beautiful book that he's drawn to. And I find that strange, especially given that it's totally harmless, right? It has no utilitarian value, it has no writing in it, and that's part of what fascinates me. Oops, I'm ahead of myself, hang on. Okay, let me go back. My slides might be out of order, I'll fix it if they are. He says that the thing was attractive because of its apparent uselessness. So I want you to hang on to that. The book was attractive because of its apparent uselessness. We also learn about this paperweight. That's what I want to get to. I find the paperweight absolutely fascinating, like a paperweight. And you can see the book pays so much attention to it. And it too is described as a beautiful thing. So here's that word beautiful twice now. And it's curiously, it's forbidden in his world, right? And again, it's another thing that's just harmless. It has no utilitarian value, and it is attractive because of its uselessness. There's the quote I want. Its apparent uselessness, and there's something attractive to Winston about it because of that. Then we learn that the party has abolished Shakespeare, right, and Chaucer and Byron. It's abolished all of those writers, that style of language, and I had to cut down my quotes because there were so many, and I don't have the time, but no Shakespeare, who said things like, "Now is the winter of our discontent," which I just think is an amazing sentence for saying things suck right now. Or we are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. So no more of that. Let me go back. So it's curious that I'm going to call now that useless beauty, right? It's not utilitarian. A blank book, a paperweight, and Shakespeare are all forbidden in that world. I mean, think about it. What harm could they possibly do? And what is it that makes the powers that be so nervous about these useless things? It is important to note that the party does have its own aesthetics. You saw there was pretty much one poster everywhere with Big Brother's face on it. That is an aesthetic. All the films are war films, All the music is military music, and the machines write the novels. Yeah. So really, all of this is to say, I just want to show, to start out, that the motif of aesthetics, the issue of beauty, it is there. It's right there in the beginning. But what really blows my mind and where it really gets complex and what I want to talk about more than that is Winston and Julia's revolt. Because if you look closely, their resistance is aesthetic in nature, okay? Let's see, hang on. Okay, let me come back to that. It's aesthetic in nature, and I'm going to say that their fight is political. It's a fight for Eros. Now, this is important vocabulary, so I need to explain. Eros, I hope you guys get this vocabulary because, I mean, really it has just changed so much of how I think, being able to have this concept. Eros and aesthetics go together. And Eros is a critical theory term in my field of modernity theory. So critical theory terms, you often can't look up in the dictionary and get the way we use them. But Herbert Marcuse, who I already told you about in his amazing book, he defines Eros as the life instincts. And more than that, the erotic energy of the life instincts. We're not talking about sex, although that's probably in there. But so Eros is life force. This is how we use it to hold all these things. Energy, passion, animation, vitality, the sense of being alive. So that's what I mean by Eros. And to remind you, it has all kinds of energy in it. And I need to remind you here that it's the same person who said the fight for life, the fight for Eros, is the political fight of the modern world that we're living in. Okay, so let's look at Julia's odd rebellion. I just think, wow, with Julia. I mean, she's interesting, and she is a rebel. I mean, can we all agree on that she's a rebel? She's a rebel. But, I mean, it's a curious rebellion. Does she organize the proles? Does she grab a gun? Does she incite rebellion or revolution? Does she protest via civil disobedience? Does she join a union? I mean, she doesn't because she can't, and she really doesn't believe that it would change anything. And, there's no way to truly rebel in the big brother system that they're in, which, at the end of the book kind of proves that as true, partly, as I'll say in a little bit. So what does she do? If we were in a class, I'd ask you, but we're not. Okay, so let me tell you, she puts on makeup. She brings Winston bread, really good bread, and great coffee. She enjoys sex. Now, these forms of rebellion seem real odd, but if you think about it, in a world where aesthetics are restricted and Eros is completely denied, what she's doing, in my view, is stealing her life from within a system that is it's a life-killing system. It's a dispiriting system, and she can't escape it. So this is what she can do. And I think her ultimate rebellion is to live. That's what she insists on, even if it's for a very short time, as Winston and Julia say. We don't have much time. But indeed, she says to Winston, don't you enjoy being alive? That's her big question to him. So for me, Julia represents Eros. Okay, she represents instincts, life force that insist on being unleashed in a system that aims to control and even eradicate them. And so for me, hers is a rebellion of the spirit. It's expressed through the body. But then there's Julia and Winston's rebellion, their revolt, which to me also looks like as Eros, as a political fight. So this is very curious to me. I love this passage. I'm still trying to hold what in the heck's going on. But I see that early on, Winston dreams about Julia, where here's his dream. With what seemed a single movement, she tore off her clothes and flung them disdainfully aside. What overwhelmed him in that instant was admiration for the gesture. With its grace and carelessness, it seemed to annihilate a whole culture, a whole system of thought, as though Big Brother and the party and the thought police could all be swept into nothingness by a single splendid movement of the arm. And then curiously, Winston woke up with the word Shakespeare on his lips. So as you can see, I mean, there is some connection between her graceful and defiant gesture. And this is not about sex, but the magnificence of the body, something that, we don't really honor too much, I think. We need to more in our society, just the magnificence of the body and Eros, right? There's something going together here. Now, check this out. So later, after they've made love, Winston thinks to himself, this is the quote right out of the book. Now, I added the Eros because desire is related to Eros. So he says, desire, Eros, he's thinking, was the force that would tear the party to pieces. It was a blow struck against the party. It was a political act, okay, on page 126. So as you can see, they're engaging Eros as a political act, as a political fight. Does raise the question, which is why do Winston and Julia engage Eros as a political fight? I don't know if at this point the answer is kind of clear, but look, the party's aim is to eliminate it. And their resistance is a fight for life, for spirit, for vitality within an anti-life system, a life-killing system. You know, again, even if it's for a brief time. Now, there's a quote in 1984 that flat states that the party wants to annihilate Eros. Okay, so when Winston is talking to O'Brien, who represents Big Brother, O'Brien tells Winston, "We will crush you. Everything will be dead inside you. Never again will you be capable of love or friendship or joy, or of the joy of living, or laughter or curiosity. You will be hollow. This is what we are going to do to you." And he doesn't stop there. So that's page 256. A little later on 267, he says it again and he adds some stuff. This is O'Brien talking to Winston. There will be no love. There will be no laughter. There will be no art, no literature, no science. Interesting. There will be no distinction between beauty and ugliness. There will be no curiosity, no enjoyment of the process of life. All competing pleasures will be destroyed. And if you've gotten a sense of that word eros, you're seeing that that is the point, is to eradicate and repress everything that about eros and any pursuit of beauty. No, not in the Big Brother system. Okay. This does bring up the next question, right? Because why? Like, why would they want to eradicate eros? Because that, if that's the big aim, I mean, why does it matter? How does it hurt anything? Well, you know, this is the soul stuff, right? It's that which makes people feel alive. It's what animates people and energizes people. And energy, joy, spirit, they're hard to control. Curiosity and alertness are very hard to control. I found this awesome quote by Joseph Campbell that we're reading in one of my classes. And Joseph Campbell gives us the why Big Brother would not want eros or vitality. The influence of a vital person vitalizes, he says. There's no doubt about it. The world without spirit is a wasteland. People have the notion of saving the world by shifting things around, changing the rules and who's on top and so forth. He's talking about saving the world. No, he says, any world is valid if it's alive. The thing to do is bring life to it, and the only way to do that is to find your own case where the life is and become alive yourself. Okay, so vitality, he's saying, changes the world. Okay, the eros is absolutely political. I'm not sure it saves the world, and I think we would need other political action, but this would be why Big Brother does not want vital people. They're powerful. The party wants total control. And if you can control people at the level of their soul, of their spirit, right, then you own them from the inside. And for Big Brother, they can control the world. They do not want eros. Now, people think it's an absolutely hopeless book, and in a lot of ways, I mean, there's truth to that, but I do see hope in the book. And it's, I feel like I'm making the Pollyanna move of, well, there is hope in the book, but there is hope in the book. And let me give you a page where it shows it. Now, it shows up also in aesthetics, so it's kind of hard to see, I think. So Winston says, if there was hope, it lay in the proles. You've all read that, right? But check it out. These are my italics. In the end, their awakening would come. And until that happened, they would stay alive, passing from body to body the vitality which the party did not share and could not kill, right? I mean, and then later, Winston says to O'Brien, there's something in the universe, I don't know, some spirit, some principle that you, the party, will never overcome, which is just true, right? You cannot kill eros in people. You can't do it. They can try. They can make it so they can't think, but you can't kill spirit completely. Then I even see hope show up in another aesthetic form, which is music, because we see that this woman, remember, she's one of the proles, and she's worked really hard, and she's large, but she's singing. The woman is singing, and Winston finds that beautiful. For the record, you might notice that the word beautiful now has shown up with the paperweight, the blank book, and now this woman singing. And Winston sees her as beautiful because he admires that despite the terrible drudgery of her life, at the end of it, she was still singing. Check my time here. Okay, so she's still singing, and what you're seeing again is spirit that has not been killed, that the Big Brother system cannot kill. So as you can see, I hope what I'm trying to show, and I could just talk forever about this and say a lot more, is that the relationships between aesthetics and eros and power are in the book. So where Orwell does talk about the totalitarian system and thought control and controlling people's actions and even their loyalty, there's more to it. And the brilliance of it, it's just absolutely knocking me out. And here's the thing. So here's my next move, though, is because I think it has everything to do with us. And I think why does it matter? Not just for those of us who love the book and see like, oh, wow, he's doing all this in the book, but why does it matter to anybody in this room? The reason I think it does is that he's not just critiquing the totalitarian system, but ours. He captures ours. And we're not in a totalitarian system. We have something else, of which certain values and structures increasingly govern our lives. And this is a bit grim. Now, I'm coming from a modernity theorist perspective, but for me, what I see is that as in the Matrix, that we find increasingly that humans serve a machine system rather than the system serving us. And instinctively, when I talk about this with students, they're all like, yes, we know. And okay, so Erich Fromm, in the afterword to the book, the version that you guys are reading, he says, it's a very similar thing. He says that George Orwell's 1984 is a warning that unless the course of history changes, that people all over the world will lose their most human qualities, will become soulless automatons, and will not even be aware of it. Okay. This is depressing. And remind us of the universe here for a minute. Because so before I launch further into other ways I see an uptick in the machine system, I do want to remind you of goods. There is good, so much good. One, you do get to read the book 1984. You do. And the thought police do not come crashing through these doors and whisk us away off into prison or a labor camp or worse, dead. And you know, in totalitarian systems, one of the things that just fascinates me is that poets, artists, writers, intellectuals, they die. They die. That is a fact. And we don't have to deal with that. I mean, I know a lot of our artists die ignored and in obscurity and starving off, but they don't get murdered. We have a union right here at this school that fights power and works for us. They work for us. They do that. They don't get murdered. Yet. Not that I know of, Terry. They're not, they do live, they're alive. So, I mean, I just think there is a lot of good. But I think the power of our system, in fact, where it's more insidious, it's harder to see, it's not like Big Brother out there that you can point at, totalitarian systems with a dictator and people with guns that control you. There's something that's concerning me, which is what I see as an uptick in our system becoming more machinic, more about itself, less about humans. Okay, I could go on for a semester about this. I'm just going to give you a very few concrete examples, some signs of our times. Well, you know, as we know, diseases of the spirit are pretty rampant right now. If you look up the statistics on depression, anxiety, and even suicide, those statistics are staggering. And what is up with that? Okay, but I call it diseases of the soul. I mean, even suicide, it's off the charts. Another example of an increasingly machinic system comes from a recently published book that my friend Nick told me about, Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow. And I read a ton of this stuff, and some of it I'm like, yeah, no, this I think maybe, because he's looking at the future, and what he calls dataism. Oops, let me come back to this. Okay, he sees on the way, well, techno-humanism, where we're increasingly machine-human interfaces, I think that's probably going to happen for sure, but this is harder to get your heads around. What he's saying is that we had a medieval worldview, which gave way to liberal humanism. If you study this, that's just true. But what he sees now, and I see this too, is liberal humanism giving way to something else, probably a lot. He's looking at techno-humanism and or dataism. So yeah, it's probably both. And what that is dataism is a worldview that believes in data as a determiner of value and reality. Data is God, ism, belief in data. And dataism adopts a strictly functional approach to humanity. That's what makes me nervous about it. Because of course there's truth to data. We don't want to be dualistic about it. Data isn't bad. It's just it's taken some turn where data is everything. Shakespeare has no place in it. Humans are basically algorithms. Even your emotions are considered algorithms. And all this other useless beauty is just they don't include it as a value because it's not functional in any way. Dataism is here. I don't know if you're aware that we tend to see, if you're talking about any big system, you're going to get data, like you students. And I don't mean to insult anybody in administration, but you can't help it. Tend to see students as data, and that hopefully complete. They're completers. If we were talking about humans rather than data, I'm guessing that completion wouldn't be part of that equation. It'd only be part of the equation. In fact, I could go on forever about what that would be. All right, so one more kind of really interesting book. I just read this. It just came out, 3 weeks ago. World Without Mind, The Existential Threat of Big Tech. So this is the kind of power that's harder to see. Franklin Foer says that more than any previous coteries of corporations, the tech monopolies, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, aspire to mold humanity into their desired image of it. Now, that's a pretty vague sentence right now, and you're probably wondering how, and if you take English 5 with me, we will read the book and we're going to look at that. And not to tell you to think that, but to have a way to think about it. Because again, books give us the concepts, the vocabulary to even be able to have the thought. Now, closer to home and harder to talk about even, because I'm very close to home now. My friend and colleague Terry Mulcair gave a talk here about 2-3 weeks ago on what's happening with community colleges and how they're being restructured to be a little different than what you're doing now. And I know a lot of people see this as a good thing, and hopefully it will be, but I don't know. I'm concerned. So Jerry Brown, our governor, he signed into law a model of the community college, and what it does is it helps people get through college more quickly and efficiently. And again, that might be helpful for people. It comes from the chancellor's, the community college chancellor's vision that he published, and here's what you don't want. It gets you in, you streamline through, you have a plan, helps you to keep from getting lost and never finishing. But you don't want to unwittingly create a model of education that looks like an efficient assembly line that funnels people straight to a job. I mean, you don't want a system that accidentally models education where, and I'm quoting Orwell again, there will be no art, there will be no literature, there will be no curiosity, no enjoyment of the process of life. Because all of that is useless, right? If it becomes functional, straight line to a job, that's the danger, in my view. And as Alexa Forrester and Eric Thompson, I think you're out there somewhere, yes, they wrote a 9-page response to this that was mind-blowing. And one of my favorite quotes from it is this. For a document that claims to, so they're responding to the chancellor's vision, just to be clear. For a document that claims to be aggressively student-centered, the vision has a lamentably impoverished understanding of what is good for students and more broadly for human beings. Not too surprising in a machine system, though. It's a hegemonic force. It speaks us. So, and I don't have time to explain that, but I understand. And of course we need jobs, that's a given, we know that. But humans do not thrive on jobs alone. They just, you know that in your heart. I love how Eric and Alexa pointed out that the Chancellor's vision of education leaves out what Einstein called holy curiosity. Check my time here. I'm good. Let me show you another quote by Einstein. Mr. Einstein said that the most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. He or she to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. Yes, Einstein said that. And I think if we were talking about humans rather than data, our conversations about education would have to include concepts outside functional practicality and would include the mystical and wonder and awe and discovery and exploration and taking a few steps back and a few steps forward and some side roads and to just be, to have your mind blown and be completely animated and turned on. So that is part of what I see doesn't get talked about. I know what I'm saying is dispiriting. I know that, And at this point, you're probably wondering what we can do. People always, like when I talk about this stuff, they're always, what can we do? I'm the Julia who feels like we can't get out of the system, and that's not the most inspiring thing. And I don't feel comfortable telling people what to do. I just can't do that. I can't tell you what you should do. I can only tell you what I did and what I hope for you. So for me, after 10 years of working a dispiriting, soul-killing job where I served people and sold stuff, I discovered an absolutely radical place that changed my life. And I hope this doesn't sound corny, it's just the absolute truth. It was Santa Rosa Junior College. It was right here where I found endless beauty. It just was, it's been the most incredible thing for me. It led me right to where I'm standing today. All the books, all the classes, all the concepts. Remember that in 1984, I've said this before, but it's worth repeating, that Big Brother has a name, which is to take vocabulary away, to take books away, to take concepts away so that you can't even have the thought, and I would add the imagination. Okay, so for me, the JC gave me just endless brain stuff. Just not even that soul stuff. Okay, so that's what was for me. And then I can tell you what I hope for you. Not what you can do, but what I hope for you, which is one. I hope you engage Julia-style resistance. If I'm right that the machine system is increasingly becoming imbricated in our lives, the thing you might consider is how to steal your own life from within the system. Because I hope I'm wrong, but I think the fight for life, the fight for Eros, is increasingly the political fight. I hope you pursue a lot of useless beauty, right? Mind-bending, useless beauty. Go for it. That you take classes in the history of Satan, welding if that turns you on, Mr. Shakespeare, the solar system, just get off the grid sometimes. Whatever turns you on, do that. English majors, my darlings, humanities majors, all art majors, I hope that you keep heart increasingly in a system that does not value what you do or what you love. But that absolutely know, that in this machine system, that beauty is a radical force. It is. And finally, I hope you all know that you are not cogs in some efficient machine system serving it. You're so much more than that. You are at the very least the stuff that's made of dead stars. Thank you. Thank you. Bless you all. Okay, well, somewhere there's a sign-up sheet for my students. If you got, okay, right on, I'll take that. And yeah, we're done. Off you go to your lives. And I think our class, let's go ahead and go to class. We'll just.
Way to be a baby. Congratulations. You were wonderful.
No,
You were wonderful.